While Roxana waited for the lift in the foyer of Chateau Felicity, she heard a car by the entrance, followed by a clatter and rattle and crash. It was Edel Munchi with his toolbox. In no mood for his handyman chit-chat, she hoped the lift would rescue her before he came in. This visit to Jal and Kumi, this attempt to sort things out with them, had heightened her anxiety. She needed to ND a way of bringing Papa back. The strain on Yezad was too much now, behaving so strangely these last few days. "Oh, look who's here," said Edel behind her. "Haven't seen you in months, Roxana. How are you?" "I'm Annie. And you?" "Champion. Just came from helping a friend with a shaky leg." He added, his dining table. "Is it all right now?" she asked politely, and Edel launched into a full account of the repair, of how his friend Cavis liked taking shortcuts, wanting to drive in 2 quick screws, but he had convinced him to take the leg right, do it the proper way, so it was as solid as Mount Everest when he had nished. "Manazé is a lucky woman to have such a talented husband," said Roxana. He blushed with modesty. "I do a little bit here and there. By the way, haven't seen your brother or sister lately. How's your papa?" "Much the same. Doctor says we cannot really hope for improvement in Parkinson's." Edel shook his head sympathetically as the lift arrived and they got in. What a complicated thing the human body is. If only there were do-it-yourself tools for when it goes wrong. We have doctors. Never trust professionals. Not in renovations and not in sickness. It's a long time since I saw your papa being taken by ambulance. Has he returned?" "He's at my place. Upstairs the ceiling needs to be XED." His eyes lit up. "No one told me about the problem. Kumi is looking after it." Roxana lunged for the button as they came to his oar, but was too late. He made a don't worry gesture with his hand. To get a contractor who is honest, knowledgeable, and audible is very hard. 3 minimum requirements. Maybe I should talk to Kumi. That would be helpful. Advice from a third party might embarrass Kumi into acting, she thought. I can recommend someone completely honest, extremely knowledgeable, who will work for very little. In fact, for just material cost. She knew what was coming but played along. Sounds hard to believe. He smiled. If I may say so myself, it's myself I am talking about. The lift stopped and he pushed the door open for her. She tried to imagine the scenario, should he be unleashed in Papa's at, like placing a straight razor in a monkey's hand. Wouldn't be fair, she said, taking advantage of you. Where's the question of taking advantage? I'm volunteering. You know me, I enjoy it, it's my hobby. I enjoy the happiness I bring to people's hearts when something broken is made whole again. The lift bell clamored through the shaft, someone was summoning it to the ground door. Thanks, Edel, but we can't ask you to do such a big job. The ceilings are badly damaged. He ignored the person downstairs who was yelling now to shut the doors so the lift could return to the foyer. Big job or small job, the secret is to proceed methodically. Measure twice, cut once is the handyman's motto. Think the problem through, visualize the solution. Like playing chess. It's a special knack some people have. He continued to describe his virtues for the job, but she wasn't listening. It had just occurred to her. The ceilings were already in a pitiful state. They didn't need protecting from Edel. No matter how unskilled, he couldn't make them worse. And suddenly, it didn't seem such a bad idea. He could clean up the mess, perform some rough patching, make the ceilings safe. Gouges and cracks would still show, so what? It was for free, and at least Papa could go home. But RST Kumi needed to be convinced. If you're content, she said, I can tell Jal and Kumi of your kind o'er. Cent% content, he assured her. The screamer on the ground oar had gone silent, having abandoned all hope of getting the lift to descend. Edel asked if he should go upstairs with her. I could size up the job right now, do a rough estimate on materials. Better if I talk to them. RST imposing on you for such a huge favor will be their decision. Not at all, he said, getting back in the lift. Renovation, for me, is never an imposition. The lift started down, but his voice opened up, it is my source of satisfaction. Kumi. It's Roxy come to visit. Jal announced jubilantly. Come, Roxy, come. He took her hands and drew her inside, giving her a long hug. Joy and relief led his eyes, that the estrangement was not going to be permanent. Why is Yezad not with you? Still at work. She saw the way his face was lit, as though she had icked a switch, and was touched by the welcome. Kumi, he called again. Where are you? Roxy has come. Shush admonished Kumi from her room to indicate she was praying, then showed herself in the passageway for a moment, her head covered in white momol. Oh, sorry, said Jal. She came to the drawing room a few minutes later. Why so excited, like the Queen of England has arrived? No, not Armin and Hoshang, our Roxy. Kumi tapped the hearing aid in his pocket. Is it empty again? The two women put their hands lightly on one another's shoulders, their cheeks touched. How is Papa? Asked Kumi. The same. He keeps asking about the if repairs have started. I keep saying soon, Papa, soon. He's very sad, he understands I don't have a real answer. Jal's face mirrored his uneasy conscience. He wrung his hands and touched the earpiece, appealing silently to Kumi. Your gadget is giving you trouble, she said. Go, buy new batteries. I'll tell you Roxy's news later. No, it's NE. He stopped jeeting. Papa has good days and bad, continued Roxana. What makes it worse is that his pills niche before the next pension comes. I wish we could help you with more money, said Kumi. But Papa's account is empty. And Share Bazaar is very bad these days. Jal can tell you. So enough of my troubles, said Roxana. Tell me about yourself. How are you both? As you see, sunk in our misfortune, in plaster and dust. Still trying to ND a contractor, murmured Jal. No further collapse? Asked Roxana. Everything safe? Good. Then she curbed her tongue. Sarcasm wouldn't help her mission of reconciliation. That reminds me. Guess who I met downstairs? It was so lucky, Edelmunchi. You call that lucky, said Kumi. Only people who are cursed run into the fellow, and Jal laughed, glad it was becoming more amicable. I know what you mean, said Roxana. But he asked about your ceiling and aired to exit, free of charge. Of course he would, said Kumi. He would pay to work in someone's he's so desperate. His wife won't let him touch a thing in the house. He's not a handyman, he's a clown, chuckled Jal. He should take his tools and join the circus. My reaction was the same. Then I began to think, none of us has the money for a contractor. If he can at least apply new plaster, it will be an improvement. No, the man is a menace, declared Kumi. When he changes a light bulb, the whole building has a power failure. And you want him to work for us? Roxana shrugged. It's your choice. The earlier tension began creeping back into the room. Then, to her surprise, Jal spoke up. I like the idea. What's the harm in letting Edel? Kumi turned sharply, and he fell silent, waiting to be told oh. But the argument never materialized. Yes, thought Kumi, let Edel do the work. What could be better than having the idiot make a bigger mess of things? With his penchant for prolonging every job to prolong his own pleasure. Papa's return could be delayed nightly. She wouldn't need to invent excuses. Edel would be the perfect, unwitting accomplice. Kapoor held up a finger to object and pointed at his watch. See the time? No more, mister. He peered into Yezad's face. For 2 days now, you look so depressed. What's wrong? Yezad shrugged. I guess because of everything that we've talked about, and those old photos, and you made a convert of me. I really believe a good man like you should be in politics. Otherwise, only crooks and scoundrels reign over us. Isn't this funny, said Mr. Kapoor with a sad smile. We've completely reversed. I sound like you sound like me. He sighed. Wish I had a choice. We always have a choice. But family comes RST, Yezid, you understand that. Family service before public service, my wife reminded me. And besides my blood pressure, there's the suitcase money. I agree with her, we shouldn't spend it on the election. He took Yezid by the arm and led him to his OCE. Don't be so disappointed. It seemed like a good idea, once. Now it's nished, we have to accept that. You said it was your duty. Oh yes. Mine, and every good citizen's. I'm not special. But I've come to realize, duty is worthless in this case. Meaning? Think about it, pure duty is unconcerned with outcome. Even if I become a municipal councillor, GHT the good GHT, what do I have at the end? The satisfaction of knowing I've done my duty. As far as Bombay is concerned, nothing changes. Nobody can turn back the clock. Yezad listened in disbelief. Mr. Kapoor's complete about-face was hard to take. So, continued Mr. Kapoor. Nothing left now except to talk of graves, of worms and epitaphs. Let us sit upon these chairs and tell sad stories of the death of cities. Yezid said nothing. If the boss wanted to babble, he'd have to do it without the banity of response or reaction. Then Mr. Kapoor made a lame attempt at humor. You know my problem? I am one who loves Bombay not wisely, but too well. And I think I make my wife jealous. She doesn't want another beauty competing with her. Intense irritation now made Yezid break his resolve of silence. Don't you have any Indian sources to quote, for a change? The acid in the retort dripped away harmlessly. The mere fact that Yezid had decided to speak delighted Mr. Kapoor. That's a basic problem with our education, yours and mine. Anyway, Shakespeare is like Bombay. In them both, you can ND whatever you need, they contain the universe. Seething inwardly, Yezad studied his watch. If you don't mind, I'll make a move. Mr. Kapoor locked his desk. I hope you're not still angry. What right do I have to be angry? It's your life, your wife, your decision. Mr. Kapoor picked up his attaché case and switched the lights. Have you noticed, Yezid, I took your advice? I'm not using the air conditioner. From now on, I'll accept whatever Bombay airs, heat, humidity, sea breeze, typhoon. I've been following this philosophy for years. Of course, it's easy for me, I can't afford air conditioning. You don't need it. We Indians have our own built-in cooling system, chilies and garam masala make us sweat, the breeze evaporates the sweat, and we are cool. Yezad smiled weakly. Mr. Kapoor made one last attempt to placate him. Think of this, Yezid, we'll always have the photographs. Our city is preserved in them. And the record will remain for those who come after us. They will know that once there was a time, here, in this shining city by the sea, when we had a tropical Camelot, a golden place, where races and religions lived in peace and amity. Yezid stopped listening, again feeling exasperation and, in spite of himself, action, which the man's passions and contradictions provoked. He was certain that, in 2 months, when the election was over, Mr. Kapoor would regret not making the attempt. Or he might change his mind again in the next few days, and decide to run, who could tell where Mr. Kapoor was concerned. As they walked to the door, Yezid saw him gazing fondly at his Christmas display. Someone should tell him he was too young to slip into second childhood. He needed a jolt of some sort, something drastic, to shake him out of this daze of self-satisfaction. All along the street, establishments seemed to have taken their cue from the Bombay Sporting Goods Emporium. The Jai Hind Bookmart featured a barefoot Santa in Padmasana, an English translation of the Bhagavad Gita open in his lap. Perched upon his nose were half-moon reading glasses. Rasoy stainless steel Haddon. Aproned Santa stirring a large cooking utensil. The Boggart Opticals Santa wore stylish ReadUpHere sunglasses. Every shop had to have one, thought Yezid wearily. They were no longer content with a Christmas tree, a star, an angel. The men's clothing store had one with shirts and ties draped over his outstretched arms. The shoe stores held a stack of shoeboxes. Mercifully, the sari shop had refrained from a 6-yard spree of cross-dressing. The whole exercise was tedious, devoid of wit, the bookmart accepted, thanks to Vilas's imagination. For once, a Shiv Sena agitation would be welcome against this nonsense. Where were those goondas when needed? Why weren't they rampaging down the street, smashing these crass displays? Perhaps that was the type of stimulant Mr. Kapoor needed. If his elders were dantlered, the blinking bulb silenced, the annoying white-bearded batsman drawn and quartered by the Sena's stormtroopers, it might bring back his guiding spirit. What a salutary shock for him if Shiv Sena came to his doorstep. Outside the shuttered bookmart, Vilas hailed Yezad from his perch. He patted the step and made room for him to sit. No, it's late, said Yezid, kneading his neck muscles, trying to ease the steamness. You look upset. Something wrong? Mr. Kapoor, you know about his election plans, he was so committed before. Now it's a complete reversal. He told me his wife said no. Vilas laughed. How sweet. A henpecked Punjabi must be a rare thing. I don't know what's happening to him. And my promotion has vanished. While they talked, a laborer with an empty basket approached the bookstore, halting at a respectful distance. In readiness for the scribe, he pulled out a letter from within his head-cushioning turban and attempted to smooth the crumples. Your customer, said Yezid, relinquishing the step. The pain was stuck between the shoulder blades like a knife. He rubbed the neck muscles again and again, turned his head left-right, then up and down. Instead of walking straight to Marine Line Station, he took the longer way around Dabadaleo, down Princess Street, time to think. His breath was short and shallow, he was almost panting. Breathe in over V steps, he told himself, out for the next 8. In for V, out for 8. A blast of diesel fumes made him cough. Bloody pollution. This was no city for deep breathing. Not unless he managed to slip into Mr. Kapoor's old photographs. In the old Hughes Road. And talking to Vilas had only agitated him again. Easy for Vilas to say be patient, and a way to motivate Mr. Kapoor, while here he was beside himself with worry. A motorcyclist puttered by wearing a breathing mask. Soon everybody would need one, the way things were going, but wouldn't it be great if there were a mask to deter out the world's problems? Sahibji, said a voice. He turned around, it was the man in the sandalwood shop outside Wadiajiri Temple. Yezid realized he was just passing its gates. Sahibji, said the man again, pausing in his task of sorting the sandalwood sticks by size. Sukud? It's genuine Malbari. He wore a prayer cap of black velvet, observed Yezid, the type his father used to wear. Declining the sandalwood, he continued on his way. A few steps later he hesitated, returned to the gates, and entered the compound. It was empty except for 2 bicycles chained to a post. Probably for the Chasnivalas, he thought, delivering chasni to families who had requested prayers. Ages since he had partaken of a chasni, almost forgotten what papri and malito tasted like. He stopped at the doors of the re-temple, knowing he was bareheaded. He could use his handkerchief if he... No, he had no intention of entering. The light inside was poor, but he could see the long veranda-like space with its stone or the ablutions area with its stone parapet. At the far end, a lone Gura was drying his hands and face before starting his custy prayers. Now the man pulled out his sudra and shirt so they hung over his trousers. He reached under the shirt to his custy and began untying the knots as he prayed. He unwound it from around his waist, then raised it to touch his forehead. And that slight gesture in the dim light brought back the words of the prayer Yezid hadn't recited in years. Ahura Mazda Kodai, Az Hamaguna, Padat Pasheminam. He let it run through his mind, feeling a sense of deep satisfaction that he could still remember it. Then the man formed 2 loops with the custy and lifted it to his brow again. Yezid knew he had reached the Manashni, Gavashni, Kanashni section, in preparation for readying the sacred cord. And watching the solitary Gur, the veranda in his mind began to LL with the happy crowds he would see when he came here as a boy, with his parents, on Navros and Cordad Sal, everyone in their colorful New Year nary, clutching sticks of sandalwood, thronging the parapet, eager to grab the silver Curatio to wash their hands, complete their devotions, get on with the day's festivities. The women who wore saris, like Yezid's mother, had easy access to their custis, but the ones who had to raise their skirts to untie the knots oft to the privacy partition. They were the modern women, looked upon disapprovingly by the Orthodox, who believed that once a girl began menstruating she had no business wearing a frock. Some men would cast surreptitious glances towards the frosted glass screens, hoping the light would show them more than a blurred silhouette. Many a time he heard some grandmother complain that Muamavalis couldn't behave themselves even in the Atashbiram on an auspicious day, the louts deserved to be ogged. After the custy prayers, the family would venture farther into the re-temple through the main hall. Inside, the crowd was equally thick. The closer you came to the sanctum, the warmer it grew, the re-blazing high, brighter than on any other day of the year, for the silver trays were overowing with sandalwood earrings. You had to wait your turn to kneel before the sanctum and bow your head to the ground. And after the re-temple, there would be visits to relatives, sweets to be distributed, sumptuous meals to be eaten. And in the evening, to the theater for an Audie Marsban farce or his variety entertainment show, chock full of Parsi jokes and skits and songs. The solitary worshipper nished his custy, climbed up the steps from the veranda past the uded columns, and disappeared within the inner recesses. The washing area was desolate now. How tranquil it seemed inside where the man had gone, thought Yezid, cool and dark. Roxana was right, it was a real oasis in the midst of this big, mad city. He heard a shoo-ee of feet from the hallway to the left, the slap of sapots, and before he could retreat a tall, thin gyur in white was standing next to him. The Dastorji was wearing his full prayer garb, the robes fragrant with sandalwood smoke. The smell brought a wistful smile to Yezid's face. The Dastorji smiled back. Sahibji, he said, raising his right hand to his forehead, and paused, bringing his head forward as though to better observe this Parsi lingering outside. His pupils were reduced to sharp points by his thick glasses. Yezid felt they were boring into him like drill bits, but was unable to look away. The long white beard made the thin face even longer. The Dastorji spoke again. Is it a cap you need? No, thank you, said Yezid, usted. Not today. I'm getting late. Turning on his heels, he edged to the train station. The boys were alone in the back room when he got home. He asked them where their mother was. She went out, Daddy. I can see that. I asked where. She didn't tell us. He went to the kitchen and put the kettle on for himself. Nariman's voice, requesting his bottle, drifted softly in from the front room. Jangir came hurrying to the kitchen. I think Grandpa wants to do susu. Though his son's concern touched him, he was RM. We went through this last week, didn't we? Yes, Daddy, but I think he wants to do it very badly. Listen, Jahangla, I promised myself when your grandfather was thrust into our lives, I will never touch the bottle or the bedpan. And neither will you. Jangir looked puzzled while his father was saying all this. There was sadness in his father's voice. He tried again, explaining that the bed might get wet. That's not your concern. Do your homework. His shoulders drooped as he went back, exhaling heavily. He heard his grandfather call out again, please, it cannot wait. Ultimately, it will issue forth, before lapsing into a whimper. Yezid nished making his tea, stirring his grievances into it. After a sip from the saucer he gulped the rest down and made a face. Not as good as Roxana's. He returned his empty cup and saucer to the kitchen, peeked in the back room where the boys were doing homework, and went to the balcony to lean over the railing. Was he becoming one of those pathetic men who were models of geniality everywhere except in their own homes, where they were bullies? No, he refused to believe it. His very life, the one he'd been leading till a few months ago, had been kidnapped. Roxana's family had stolen his peace and contentment. Until he could regain it, he would have to face the squalor within these four walls, in this place that used to be his sanctuary from the brutal city. He should have sat in the re-temple instead of coming back. Back to this wretched front room, this nauseating sick room. Not that it would have done much good, couldn't live in the re-temple permanently. This mess would always be waiting for him. Jangir found it impossible to pay attention to his homework. The sounds from the settee were anguishing him. He knew how uncomfortable it was when you wanted to do susu, and couldn't. He had to sewer once when Miss Alvarez had given a test and no one was allowed to go to the bathroom. But at least he'd been able to run as soon as the bell rang. Poor Grandpa had to lie there waiting, not knowing when he would get to do it. And why was Daddy so stubborn about the bottle? Jangir always understood intuitively what was upsetting him, but this time it was as though he had picked a reason at random. Go and ask again, he urged his brother. I don't know what's your problem, said Murad. Mummy told us to call Vili Auntie. She told us she had arranged it all. But what will she think when she sees Daddy is home? It's not fair, he should give Grandpa the bottle. In your dreams. Nariman moaned again, and Jangir couldn't bear it any longer. Ashamed to fetch Vili Auntie, he put down his pencil and went to the settee, ignoring Murad's frantic warnings. Grandpa hadn't had a sponge bath for 3 days. He smelled like the hamper when it was full of dirty clothes for the dobie. He took the bony trembling hand, braced himself, and pulled as hard as he could to help his grandfather to a sitting position. Mummy always made him sit up for susu. She said it was good for his joints to get some movement. The urinal crouched like a smooth white animal under the settee. He picked it up and guided Grandpa into its mouth, carefully, or the edge would hurt. It was like that game stall at a mela, he thought, where you had to pass a small loop clear along a metal wire. If it touched, a buzzer went oh and you lost. Sometimes Grandpa said ouch, if Mummy was in a hurry. They waited. Nothing happened. Grandpa looked helplessly into his face, frowned in concentration, and let out an aggressive groan, almost like a growl. Then Jangir made the hissing sound his mother used, to help things along. Sus, he said. Susu SSSSS. His father heard the sibilating prompts and came in from the balcony. What do you think you're doing? Grandpa wanted to do susu very badly, he mumbled, as the translucent plastic acquired a yellow wash and started to LL. Nervous about his father, he found it difficult to hold steady. Then the trickle faded, became a drip, stopped. Jangir gave a little shake, the way he had seen Mummy do it. As he withdrew the urinal, a few drops dribbled on the bed. He thrust it forward again, but it was too late. The NaL drop, lingering at the foreskin's tip, was all he managed to catch.